Now let's go live to the Caltech press conference where we're hearing from experts on about this quake.
That was in the Highland Park region of Los Angeles, close to South Pasadena. It's not clear which fault it was on. There's complicated faulting in that area. It was widely felt. There were 15,000 reports that came in from the Did You Feel It system and counting. Shake Alert was activated. I don't have the details on that performance yet. There's going to be a lot of data to look at. There were a couple of events in this immediate area going back to June. On June's, I'm sorry, just disappeared. I think it was June 2nd. There was a magnitude 3.4 in a very similar location that was felt. This one is bigger. There, at magnitude 4.4, we expect aftershocks. They may be a few that are big enough to be felt. Any earthquake in California, there's about a 1 in 20 chance of something bigger happening within the next few days. If something bigger were to happen, it would likely be only slightly bigger than the 4.4.
Thank you, Sue. And then we can get to some of these questions. We have Ron Lynn from the LA Times asking, what is the maximum intensity of the felt shaking of this earthquake? The shake map says 4.5. Does that mean the maximum intensity felt of shaking is level 4 or light shaking or level 5 moderate shaking?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's confusing because we're talking about the intensity scale, which is separate from the magnitude. The magnitude was 4.4, but the shaking intensity is how strong it was in any location. And I know some folks are very familiar with that. But we do get, let me just check real fast. It was about 15,000 reports. Now it's up to 20,000. And they're still coming in of people who fill out a questionnaire. The strongest shaking reports that have come in so far are what we call intensity 5. It's just barely strong enough to maybe knock a few small objects off of desks, that kind of shaking. It's not strong enough to cause damage. But so the shaking that was experienced was at worst strong enough to knock a few things off of shelves.
Thank you for that answer. We have a question from Eric Brenner from Breaking Los Angeles News, who says, everyone is talking right now about the 5% chance of a larger earthquake occurring. Statistically speaking, has the 5% now gone up? How big is that 5% at this moment? We have a few questions here. And the last part of his question is, why did people, particularly in Studio City and East Hollywood, feel it so strongly? So you can answer that in whatever order makes sense to you.
Yeah, so that foreshock probability, it's always around 1 in 20. The odds are highest right after the earthquake happens. So the more time goes by without something happening, that number drops. So it's actually lower than it was, let's see, an hour and a half ago, for what that's worth. There should be some numbers put out by now, an operational aftershock forecast. I have not seen that yet. But so 5%, it's 1 in 20, which means it won't happen. But that's the odds have gone up from what they were 2 hours ago. So it's a good time for people to be on their toes and to think about preparedness and what they would want to do, if a bigger earthquake strikes. What would you wish you had done before? And so let's see. The other question was the pattern of shaking. That always depends on a couple things. First of all, location, but also which way does the fault break? And if it breaks and is coming at you, you can get a little bit stronger shaking because of that, like a Doppler effect. If you're sitting on a certain kind of rock that shakes more, you can get more shaking there. That I have seen, the strongest shaking is very close to the epicenter, and then just a little bit to the southwest. And that possibly could reflect the way the fault broke, but we have to look at the data.
All right, and then we have one last question from Jacob Margolis from KPCC LAist, who asks if there's any updated fault information. I assume that do we know yet, Sue, which fault this was on?
Yeah, no, we don't. And as Lucy Jones said, there are a number of mapped faults that are nearby that it could have been on. At 4.4, it's small enough that it easily could have been a secondary fault associated with a larger fault zone. So that's another thing that people are going to have to be looking at.
All right, and then somewhat related to that, Ron Lynn from the Times asks, if this was related to a pair of smaller quakes in El Sereno some weeks ago, do we have any information of whether, this is again about which fault it was, but we don't know the answer to that. But do we know, is this related to the quakes from a few weeks ago?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I've been looking into that. There were a pair, one was 3.4 on June 2nd. I felt that at my house. So it was pretty widely felt for 3.4. There was another 3-ish event around the same time. It's right in the same area. So those earthquakes, they're definitely related. They're all close enough in time and space. They don't quite fit the conventional foreshock, main shock, aftershock mold. Maybe you could think of those 3.4s as foreshocks. Sometimes earthquakes are related in ways that don't quite fit the standard statistical mold. But yeah, they were close enough in time and space that there pretty clearly is an association. And that's something, the distribution of these small events, including the aftershocks, are one of the bits of information that will help us figure out what fault it was on.
All right, looks like we don't have any additional questions right now, so I'd like to reiterate for people who are just joining us. This is the Caltech Seismological Laboratory Virtual Earthquake Press Conference. We are here today with Sue Huff from the USGS and Gabrielle Tepp from Caltech. If you have questions for them and you're a member of the news media, please post your questions using the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen, and we will answer the questions.
All right, we're listening to a live press conference from Caltech talking about when or where this earthquake originated from, which fault. They're clearly trying to look into that, whether it was a foreshock, main shock, aftershock, how these earthquakes we've been experiencing could be perhaps intertwined. That's something that scientists and geologists are going to be looking into and determining for quite some time.